I'm Chip Hanna, and this is the For You Leaders podcast featuring Kirk Dando. We've studied over 8,000 successful, high-growth leaders. We distill their practices and perspectives down to lessons that you can apply today. Welcome to part 3 of our interview with Doug Song. He's one of the co-founders of Duo Security. Now, the first episode, you got to hear all about the vision behind Duo Security. The last episode, you heard all about how Doug and Duo gets employees engaged and behind the mission of Duo. But how does this all actually get implemented in the real world? How does Duo do it?
Yeah, Chip, I'm really excited about today's podcast. It's the third and final podcast with Doug, and he has provided tremendous insight. If you've not listened to the previous two, I would strongly encourage you to go do that. And as you've heard us mention in the previous episodes, you have to find product market fit. And that's something you're always innovating on. But once you have found product market fit, really what you're left to do then is come up with a strategy that will unlock more of that market. Now, I know that sounds overly obvious and embarrassingly simple. It's not always easy to do. Most great businesses or businesses that are starting to scale have some sort of strategy. It's pretty rare that I meet with a CEO or a business where they just have no strategy whatsoever. That's pretty uncommon. They either have it written or sometimes just mentally it's what they're discussing. But the biggest risk becomes execution, and at any sort of scale. Oftentimes I'll talk to people and say, we had this strategy, we got off site, we talked about it, and 6 months later they look up and go, well, why aren't we doing it? Or how did we get away from that? Or how did this get so complicated? That's when things start to fall apart.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And listen to Doug in today's episode talk about how they operationalize the strategy and their values in the business to make sure it's executed. Now, it all starts out by taking the advice from the last episode with Doug. Here's what he says.
But don't get more complicated than it needs to be.
Today is no different. You're going to continue to get some incredible insights and advice from Doug, who deeply cares about not just scaling a business, but sharing the advice and the lessons he's learned along the way. So today is going to be chock full of more of those learnings from Doug. Today's episode hits on some really popular topics, things like board management, hiring well, vacation time, and a whole lot more. But really, today's episode is all about how you operationalize not only your strategy, which is obviously critical, but how do you operationalize your values?
Yeah, well, it's how you operationalize it. Every company has a set of values. Very often it's stuff like teamwork, whatever, and they all show up on posters around the office, right? But at the end of the day, it's what you do, not what you say, and what behavior you will admit that defines, again, your culture and who you are and what you stand for, right? That's what customers know you for, right? That their lived experiences with you, the competence they've seen demonstrated over and over again, and the ways in which you've shown up to address their needs. We have kind of 3 basic values in Duo: engineer the business, learn together, and be kinder than necessary. That all comes from a bit of what's here in the Midwest, and from the University of Michigan. At one point, the world's winningest college football program, but the team, right? It's we win as a team, we lose as a team. Everything else is just friction. And so we worked really hard to establish an operating model and a cadence and cultural rituals and practices that helped us identify the things that were really working, that we could standardize, make repeatable, elevate, and again, drive, right, to scale. Because in every part of our business, there's some way in which we could be better than what our competitors are doing. In every part of our business, there was something that could provide the opportunity for a bit of a wow moment, right, for a customer in their journey with us, right? And you sum that all up, and it ends up being a customer experience and a degree of success that they just have never seen from any other vendor that has served them, when every part of our organization has been enabled, right, to deliver that and innovate it and drive that. And so that's what we did. We pushed decision-making down and tell people I'm a CEO and the janitor, so are all of you. And so the expectation is that everyone here has a responsibility to make decisions on behalf of the company. But every decision has an owner. Not all decisions are made the same way. It just depends. We don't vote on everything. Neither is everything sort of a dictatorship. It just, might need 3 people to go off. We're going to do these things and come back. But the whole point is that we have to have processes. I never cared about the quality of any individual decision, but I cared a lot about the quality of the decision process. Are we coming together, understanding what do we learn, right? What do we need to stop, start, or continue, right, to be successful? Because again, if I have 700 brilliant and diverse sort of perspectives in this business, aligning on it, trying to go into a decision, right? All is a cacophony, right, of conflicting ideas and all this stuff. Well, we need one shared perspective coming out on what worked, what we'll try next, and that's how we move forward, right? We leverage, right, that the diversity of thinking and skill sets we have, come up with these original ideas, but we have to make them ours, because if we were just copying our competitor's playbook, there's no reason why we would ever win, right? They invented it, right? So we have to come up with our own.
Yeah, well, I like how you talk about operationalizing, and it's really that tone from the top. These are beliefs that you and the people that obviously are part of the business hold tightly. And so I like how you said, let's frustrate the bad guys, not the customers. It's it's a very simple but very powerful saying. And then the being kinder than necessary. I remember I got to experience that when I very first started working with you. I don't know if I'm sure you'll probably remember this. We were having an offsite strategy session, and I was flying to Detroit, and I'd gotten injured the night before. I didn't have time to get to the doctor, and you called and found out. And when I arrived, you had crutches waiting for me.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, we need you to be there. So,
yeah.
Well, look, I think here in the Midwest, we tend to be good neighbors, but more than that, right? If we're to be successful, just like what's the Michigan difference? As any prior coach would ever ask the question or answer it. It's never that we had the best players. Had some superstars here. All that kind of stuff. It's that the team went out of its way to help each other be successful. It was the team, right? The whole Schembechler kind of talk, and I think it's true, right? Like ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things, right? When we come together in service of a larger purpose and mission, that's that's something we're aligned to, and something that we help each other achieve. And for us, it's just part of also just what is that we actually have to do as a business, right? We are here to serve. We're not the rock stars. We're the roadies, right? All these businesses, they have their own respective mission. They have their own businesses that they're trying to be successful with. Our job is simply to protect them and make sure that they get there. And so, again, in our industry, that you might hear like, oh, so there's like all these security gurus or security ninjas or security rock stars, and we completely eschew that kind of language. I hate that stuff. We don't ever want to be the rock stars, the roadies. We don't have to be the astronauts. We can be mission control, right? There is a lot of purpose, nobility, value, right, in what is we do, and nobody really has to know, and we don't care. We take pride in the job well done, even if nobody's looking.
That is so true, and that's one of the things that oftentimes I'm asking CEOs or other people that we've had on the podcast is how do they think about really going higher, retaining, because obviously nothing performs at a 9 or 10 with leaders and others that are at a 5 or 6, and at the core of that is a big part of what you just said, the courage to their convictions, and how does it get operationalized and how does it show up. And that's something that's I'm not sure, for people who are listening, thinking about how to look for that in promoting and hiring people is that courage part. What anything in particular that you kind of would look for when you talk to people that you're instrumental in?
Oh, sure. Yeah. We did a lot of behavioral interviewing where we're trying to get a sense for how people thinking about their own performance and so forth are able to reflect, right, on those kind of journeys for themselves. Simply, there's a bunch of things. Like we used to look for distance traveled. It didn't matter if people had the exact certifications, knew the exact technologies, or had the exact experience we're looking for. More often, what we really wanted to see, right, was distance traveled. Folks who kind of took a chance, right, on something new, and stuck with it, right. And we have many examples of that. I remember some of our earliest sales interviews. One of our guys, Hiroki, who's an amazing sales leader at Duo, came into the company as a student intern, but kind of grew up with our culture and all this stuff. But he used to go, directly for that kind of line of questioning for any of the sales reps, right? Tell me a time where you went to go start something new, something that might have been transformative in your life, some new exercise regime or program of study or professional development, like something that you knew was going to be painful, difficult, and challenging, but stuck through it, and describe that to me, right? Tell me, and we got all kinds of answers, right? And Hiroki, the way I kind of knew Hiroki was going to make it early is because I saw his name on the top of every leaderboard in the bars, in the student bars in Ann Arbor. So there's these bars, right, where you have like the guy's name's like the number one in all of them. Like, who is what? That's Hiroki. Like, but like it's that kind of crazy drive, right, and singular focus, and again, we would see that all the time. We even hired people. I mean, honestly, I would say even, but we hired people. One of our office buildings is literally on the same block as the homeless shelter here, and it causes certain other kinds of issues sometimes for us. But we have actually hired from there, and we've hired people into our IT program, right, who have had interesting journeys for themselves, and who, again, because of the distance they traveled before Duo, the experience that they've had at Duo, now have gone beyond Duo, right, and are now actually developers, right, for these like a national bank and all this kind of stuff. And so for us, it was always we always wanted to see that kind of thing. We also wanted to see a certain degree of not just humility, but self-awareness, right? So we'd ask questions like, what's the biggest misconception about you? Just to understand if a person actually is ever reflected on the impact they have on other people and their perceptions of them. Because again, if a person can't step out of themselves to kind of evaluate themselves in that way, they can't be coached. They can't take feedback. They can't be kind of necessary. And so those are all the kind of things. And a whole laundry list of other practices we have. But by and large, Duo hired a bunch of people that were not obvious fits, right? For and most of my leaders, just like myself, were all doing our jobs for the first time.
Yeah, well, then once again, it's the people that are listening. I want you to tune your ear to hearing the intentionality around and the commitment to these things. It wasn't, So it proved out, and obviously the results the Duo has been able to achieve. One of the things that I always like to ask CEOs, especially ones that are running wildly successful companies like yours, you're busy. I mean, you get pulled in a lot of different directions, both for the business, outside the business. Talk a little bit about how you think about keeping balance with that and with the family. And before I say much more, a lot of times people say there is no such thing as work-life balance. That's not a real thing. So acknowledging that ahead of time, but it's a term that everybody associates with. How do you think about or make sure that, I know how much you care and love for your family. I know how much your wife and kids mean to you. And I also know how much time and effort you give towards the business and others.
Yeah. Maybe the punchline is, at this point, and actually for much of the company, what we have established as just as a hard standard, right, for our time in office is just a straight 9-to-5 work culture. You come in at 9, you leave at 5. And I know that, people do time shift. Our engineering team comes in at 10, might leave at 6 or whatever. But part of that discussion with my team and leadership has always been that in order for you to be the person that we need you to be, right, at Duo, you need to be more than just a worker bee, right? You need to have a work life. You have to have a personal life outside of work. You have to be a whole person, and you have to bring ideas, right? New ideas into our business from every possible direction, right? Like you'd be amazed the number of completely, seemingly random kinds of inputs and capabilities we've internalized from what had been kind of someone's hobby or some pet interest they've kind of gone down the route of, right? We hired all these videographers now at Duo and motion graphics people and artists and stuff who've had the most amazing impact on how we've been able to develop and realize our brand, but because they were making comedy videos, right, on YouTube and all this other kind of stuff, or they were acting, right, part-time or what have you. And so at any rate, but for founders, it's hard, right? Founders, as I told my wife from the start, we would have kind of this kind of establish some, expectations here. Yes, the office would be 9 to 5, but I might also be 9 to 2, meaning that between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., I'm with family. I'm there for dinner. I'm putting them to bed. We're doing all this stuff. And if my wife and I aren't watching Netflix, then probably I'm back on my laptop until I turn out the light. But those are the kinds of sacrifices, right? That sometimes you make, but that is not to be confused, I think, with compromise, right? Because we all make sacrifices, right, for the things that we care about, our families, our careers, whatever goals you might have. You make those personal sacrifices, but what you don't want to do is end up making compromises, right? Compromises of your family, compromises of your values, compromises, because that's when you're giving things up, right? Truly that, or not truly living up, right, to your intent. And so anyway, so we were always pretty thoughtful about that at Duo, and that's where, again, being kind of necessary was a large part of that we needed managers not just to observe the flexibility of an open PTO policy, but literally to manage to what we had, which was a minimum 3-week mandatory vacation policy, right? You were going to take at least 3 weeks of vacation, and every manager is going to ensure that happens. We had lots of things like this where, the business, the culture at work was set up in such a way to really drive people, right? To seek, enjoyment, skill, experiences outside of work that they could bring back. In many cases, we formalized that. We would have them come and talk about their summer abroad or their vacation. And early in the company, every new hire would do a quick bio, and when we could, we'd have every employee, if they so desired, actually talk about their vacations, right? Because that's how you get ideas, right? That's how you and realize that it's not, no one's here just to work and just to do this stuff. We're all here to be successful together, and all of us, right, in our lives and careers, it's just as much as there's a story arc, right, of the company's success and our journey, as a shared journey as an organization. Each one of us has a personal career arc and story that we're looking to fulfill here. And that's really what I want every one of our managers to figure out. What is someone trying to do in their life and career? And can we help them get there? Because if the needs that we have as an organization present as opportunities, right, for them and their development, then we all win, right? By having that person do what they would naturally want to do and gravitate toward and accomplish. But now we can all celebrate.
Yeah. Well, we've got a little bit of time here left. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about, you guys have had a tremendous amount of success because of the things that you've been talking about. But obviously, it takes more than just really, waking up, creating a culture that the values are lived out and people feel like shit are happy and fulfilled. And it's a diverse culture and community. But at the end of the day, there's, and this is an oversimplification, but I always tell people, we got to get product market fit, and you're always kind of innovating on that. But once you have product market fit, then what you have to do is come up with a strategy that unlocks more of that market in an accelerated and efficient way. And once you have the strategy, then all you're left to do is really execute against that strategy. But most of the times, probably 95% of the time, people have figured out product market fit, have a strategy, but the execution piece of it is where it kind of starts to falter or fall apart. Talk a little bit about how, as you have grown the business, how you've thought about, that journey of, once we've got that product market fit, understanding the customer, the empathy that you talked about, really truly understanding and walking their shoes, going about strategy and execution.
We used to talk about building an enduring company, right? Funny now that we're acquired, but we are part of an enduring company that probably and actually we are an enduring business, right, within that company. So those things don't change. But what does it take to do those? To do that, 3 things. I think you have to have that winning strategy, you say, which you have the right strategy, you have the right team. And then you have to have, again, strong execution. But on the strategy, I think it's just having the right story of and I do think of building plans as stories, right? It can't be sort of this metric that way and this other thing over here, and these things are disconnected from what customers are trying to do. Like, you have to understand, you have to be able to tie together a story that, as Matt Kohler, my board member from Benchmark, who I shared with Uber, used to say was would stick to your ribs, right? Relevant, inevitable, believable, and simple. And for us, we worked really hard to craft a strategy and a story for our business that every person in the company could understand. Super important, right? That everyone could see themselves in what our strategy would be, right? And find their place. The second though was right, and partly to do that, we ended up, that was my job for the longest. It is my job, I think, primarily, but I think some part of that had been also to get the specialized kind of talent I needed to help tell that story well. So the comms piece was super important, internally and externally. PR, making sure all the things we did that were exciting sounded exciting, right, for in the market, but also reflecting that all the things that we were doing right, we would recognize we were doing well, and we call out. And it's just as dangerous to do things that are successful but then ignore them, but then let them pass unnoticed. That can't happen. Like, you have to call out success in the business, because otherwise, all the things that are going wrong will be the only story you have. That will be the only narrative, right, that people have. Is again, the things that are broken, people are vocal about it much louder, but you have to have that balance, because the reasons you win, and I just believe it strongly, but the reasons you win in the market, you get to control, right? The reasons you don't win, well, some of you may not. If a competitor is not doing well, they drop their pants and give their products for free, like all that stuff. There are many reasons why one might lose, but the reasons you win, you can scale. And so you got to make sure that there is a path in your company for the right stories to be elevated and escalated, right, from the front lines to the top of the org, that you can then rein back down and everyone can understand. The second, though, on the right team.
Let me just real quick interject, because I want to really double down on something I think is really insightful, and I want people to make sure they hear this that are listening. Is, I like how you said that, Doug, is really the plans are part of the story, and I think that people relate with the stories, and you and I talked about this, and you hear me say this, is I'm a firm believer, just because I've only seen it in action, is if you change the language, you will inform and change the conversations that are happening in and throughout the organization that you don't get to be part of, and in that creates the outcomes that we're going for. So if you change the language, you're going to change the conversations. If you change the conversations, you're going to change or get the outcomes that you're going for. And I just haven't heard anybody really describe it that way. I think that's super powerful to think about that thread that's pulled through the stories and how it impacts back up into the customer. And I think the more that you can relate strategy to that, sure, there's a lot of process. Yes, there's a lot of ways of executing on. There's a lot of ways of cascading out in the business, software and otherwise. But it's those stories that inform the conversations that are happening all the time. So I really appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah. So, I mean, CEO, I do think there's a role as chief storyteller, right, for the business, internally, externally, and you got to take that seriously. The second is, the right team. And I think, that's where my HR partner has always been an amazing resource for me, right, to think about kind of the matrix of kind of need and core competency, and how we do or don't cover all that with the team that we have today and what we might need to do tomorrow. But part of that also is just making sure that you have a really good process, right? So as we talked about, how are you kind of reviewing kind of those things with your leaders and what they want to do? How you're reviewing, whether how your culture is developing, right, with the contribution of every new hire. And again, I do think of culture as something to be developed, not preserved. I think values are really important to hopefully carry forward and not change very often. But culture is more than that, right? It's more than just your values. It's the vision. It's how you communicate. It's the practices and rituals you have, and the operating system of the business. And I think having a positive and purposeful culture, and having the right team that is aligned to building that with you, as much as just delivering the results, right, that you might be looking for otherwise, is it's the how, not just the what, right? That you've got to make sure that team is focused on, and that's part of that third thing of of execution, right? Predictable, consistent growth comes from doing the right things well. I mean, it's kind of simple enough, but
sometimes it's overly obvious and embarrassingly simple, but not necessarily easy. And I mean, that's anybody that's listening to this. One of the things you said earlier is the numbers and stuff will take care of themselves if you do the right thing, which is what you're saying. And people are listening to this. I mean, that's your intentionality and your thoughtfulness has produced an incredibly successful company and the numbers and everything else like that behind it. But that I don't think has ever been the motivation. It's the things that you truly are talking about. And I just really want to, highlight that and double down on that piece of things for people that are listening.
Yeah, no, it's just, I get, in fact, I've told people the only number I really care about, like the one number I actually care about in my business is our NPS, right? What do customers think about our business? The Net Promoter Score, measure promoters versus detractors, and similarly eNPS, right? And for us, for all these years, they've basically matched and tracked each other, right? We're in the low 70s and sometimes high 60s in terms of NPS, and that's a remarkable result, right, for an industry where averages are in the teens. But again, so and actually, just to give full credit, right, the score takes care of itself is actually the title of a book by Bill Walsh, the former coach of the 49ers, who really did create this dynasty. It's true, right? Like my dad was a Buddhist, actually a monk. He went to this Buddhist temple university when he was younger. And anyway, I just believe fundamentally in this kind of karma. Like you do the right things, you do well by others, and the universe won't let you starve, right?
Yeah, I like how you say that. That's very, very true. I mean, it's evident in your life for sure. What we've got a couple minutes left here. One of the things that I'd like you to spend a little bit more time talking about is just board management. I know that that's a little bit of a black box for some people. Some people view their board as kind of almost a parental type of relationship where the board's there to kind of tell them what they're doing right and wrong and help them, succeed in life. Some people, view the board is adversarial and isn't really careful about how they put the board together. Just the people that will give them the money is the people that end up on the board. There's a lot more to it, as you're well aware of. Talk a little bit about your experiences and how you think about board management.
Yeah, boards can be all those things, but they're all self-fulfilling prophecy. You think that the nature of a board is to be adversarial of the culture and stuff, and then that's what you will get. But we took the same degree of intentionality to the construction of the board as we did to our team, and we thought of the board as, again, another team, right? In the company. Now, often, they comprise your investors and other things, but that's where, again, the dynamic you want to have, I always found to be really useful is that, number one, if you can, get investors who are board members who have all been operators, right? I think that just helps a lot because they have nuanced understanding and degree of empathy around this stuff. They're not just doing the sometimes reductive VC pattern matching of, well, this is what this company did and they were successful and this is what you should do. Like that's the survivorship bias that happens. That's just not right. And what you really need to figure out is, again, how to expand your toolkit, how to, be experimental, take chances, win or learn, right, in your business, but not have board members want to beat you up for that, right? They should be right there alongside you, internalizing, taking those chances, but also for offering, other ideas, resources, options, thoughts. They're a resource for you as a CEO. And although they're technically your boss, ultimately, right? That's the way that most boards are set up, and it's good to have that, right? You want to cultivate that, the accountability for yourself as a leader. So my board meetings were, again, a bit of the report out because you still got to do some amount of that. Not everyone reads all the board reports ahead of the meeting and packets. So there's a few minutes of that, but then there's strategic discussion, there's board business, but there's always a closed session that always offer the board, take 20 minutes. I'll myself, basically this is just for the non-executive board members, like John, my co-founder, and myself who are on the board. We left the room, and this is their chance for the board to talk about me specifically. How is Doug doing? What, how do they think about all this stuff? Like to have their own private forum, so that when I come back, one of them, usually my lead director or lead independent, whoever that was, would then summarize, give me the feedback on all this stuff. And even as a private company, right? You're not a public company yet. You're not forced to do things like the CEO succession plan. You're not all this kind of thing. You still want to be thinking about that kind of accountability for yourself as a leader, right? Because you don't get it. Like, it's a blessing, actually, right? Just like having, like, in fact, one of the reasons to have a coach as a CEO is you're not going to get the feedback.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you did is you opened that relationship up. So I would talk to the people on the board because you wanted that feedback. You wanted that loop. I think sometimes people wonder, is it okay for the coach to talk to the board and everything else like that? And I think it depends upon, I guess how you're using them. But I think that the relationships I've seen that work the best is when the coach does have access to the board and is appropriate and respectful of that, but the board, uses that as a piece of information to help the CEO be even better.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I just think, the one description I've ever had for my job that's consistent has been, my job is to make Duo successful. But that's my job. For some CEOs, at some point, the best way for them to make their company successful is to find a new CEO. And that's fine. But to be prepared to do what's required for the company to be successful, you've got to be able to get the feedback on your own leadership. But you cannot mistake that for who actually runs the company. You run the company. You're the CEO. The decisions are you. You're not asking the board what you should do, what the company should do. You're telling them what your intention is. You're asking them if you're looking for their feedback. You're looking for their help. Looking for their ideas and reaction. You're looking for their support. But what you're not doing is the board is not a shadow management team.
That's very insightful. That's super powerful what you just said there, because I think that's a lot of times what ends up happening. And if you're working with people that haven't been operators and don't understand that, that's the role they think they're supposed to play on the board.
Yeah, no, and you have to be really careful with that. Because again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you're continually asking the board, what do you think we should do, right? Why are you there?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to be super respectful of your time, Doug. We're getting within 1 minute of time here. So this has been amazing again. And this is the kind of stuff that really does, as you started off the podcast saying, really does help kind of pay it forward. But so thank you for taking the time to do that very much. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover or hit on?
Well, just on the board topic, another thing that I think people sometimes aren't sure about is what kind of relationship they should have with their individual board members, right? And how formal they should be and how this should work. I think as a CEO, you need to have a personal relationship with every board member. You've handpicked them. They are part of that team that you've built, just like the rest of every other part of your team in business. You've interviewed them, hopefully, in the same way that maybe you've interviewed the rest of your for the rest of your team, for the history, skills, but also their values and motivation. Like, why are they on the board? Why are they trying to get out of this experience? Et cetera, et cetera. And you should be able to have frank and one-on-one conversations with them whenever needed. And you should not shy away from that. I think people really don't they don't cultivate the kind of relationships with their board members that I think Lori Norrington, my former lead director, who I loved. I miss Lori so much. Lori's so great. But she used to call it the grocery store test. Like, if you see this person in a grocery store, are you running up to them, right, to spend the time to chat with them because you so much enjoy that, or are you hiding from them? Do not build a board where you're hiding from these people because you're scared of them, you're uncomfortable with them, you don't know how to. You need to have a personal and working relationship, and very often for tough decisions or decisions that are really impactful to the business, that you're looking like a fundraising, right, kind of decision or things like this, you want to get that alignment by having done the work like you would in your business, talking to people one-on-one before you bring them together to get things done. And you got to be able to work with the board in that way, just like you would your own team.
Yeah. Well, that's, there's the informal part of building the relationship is where, that really is where the relationship is built such that it can handle the weight of the truth, handle the weight of getting aligned. All those things are kind of difficult. Were there things that you kind of did formally that kind of helped build that relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I made sure that I had regularly scheduled time with board members. So, we would do the board dinners, all those kind of things. But outside of that, I would make sure that, on visits to California, because most of my board members were there, I would have pop in, grab lunch, coffee, whatever. Or if we did have decisions to make that was rounding up on, I would be doing individual one-on-one calls with each of my board members, right, to get there, have discussions with them, just outside of, again, the group discussion, or preceding the group discussion. And then we could reflect on that stuff together. I would know how to steer the conversation. I know how to set the table for the right, understand the dynamics there. At any rate, so especially it's specifically around fundraising, and the fundraising stuff, that's where it gets really tricky. We should do a whole show on fundraising, but I don't know if we could.
I would actually love to do a full podcast just on fundraising with Doug. If that's something that you would be interested in, please leave us a comment and we will make that happen. Doug has got obviously incredible insight. I really want to thank Doug once again for all of his time and energy over the past 3 podcasts. Doug is an incredible 4U leader that I hope you have had a chance to learn from. I sure have learned a lot from Doug, not only from these interviews, but the time that I've been able to spend with Doug and his amazing team. It has made me a more effective leader. It has made me more insightful, and it has allowed me to pay it forward with other people that I get the opportunity to work with and coach. Stay tuned for the next episode of the 4U Leaders podcast. You are going to love it. If you enjoyed this podcast, will you take a minute to write us a review on iTunes or whatever medium you're listening to this podcast on? It helps spread the word and allows us to help more leaders like you become 4U leaders. Thank you for listening and have a blessed day.